The storm had swallowed the entire coastline when the little girl appeared barefoot, shivering and running like something behind her wanted her dead. Cars rushed past. Thunder cracked. No one stopped. No one except the wrong person. A black SUV slowed beside her. Windows tinted, engine too quiet. The kind of vehicle you only see in stories that end badly. She didn't look at it. She kept running until a woman's scream exploded from the cliffs below. The sound cut through the rain like a knife. The girl stopped, turned, and her heart dropped down by the crashing waves. A car had skidded through the guardrail and plunged into the ocean with a woman still trapped inside. People gathered, shocked, frozen, filming with their phones instead of helping. But the little girl, the runaway, didn't hesitate. She dropped her backpack, stepped onto the slippery rocks, and dove straight into the black water without a second of fear. 9 minutes. That's how long she was underwater. 9 minutes before the crowd screamed, and a pair of small hands dragged the unconscious woman back to shore. Nobody knew who the girl was. Nobody knew where she came from. But within an hour, every crime family in the city would know her name because the woman she'd saved was the wife of the most feared mafia boss in the entire East Coast. And by sunset, that little runaway would become part of his family forever. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in those 9 underwater minutes turned a terrified child into the most unexpected hero the mafia had ever seen. The girl's name was Sophia. 11 years old, 4 feet 7 inches tall, weighing maybe 80 pounds, soaking wet, which she was, standing on those jagged rocks, salt water streaming from her tangled brown hair. She had been running for 3 days straight. 3 days since she escaped from the Riverside Children's Home after Mr. Harrison tried to put his hands where they didn't belong. 3 days of sleeping in bus station bathrooms and eating scraps from garbage cans behind fast food restaurants. Her thin jacket clung to her shaking body like a second skin. Her sneakers were falling apart, held together with duct tape she'd stolen from a hardware store. Everything she owned was crammed into that weathered backpack, now lying forgotten on the rocks above. But none of that mattered when she heard that scream. The luxury sedan had hydroplaned on the rain-slicked highway. Sophia watched it happen in slow motion. The expensive car spinning like a toy, smashing through the metal barrier, tumbling down the rocky slope, and plunging hood first into the churning gray ocean. The driver's door was already underwater. The passenger side tilted toward the sky at a crazy angle. Through the rear window, Sophia could see movement. Someone was alive in there. Someone was drowning. Maybe 20 people had gathered along the guardrail. They pointed. They shouted. They held up their phones to record the disaster. But nobody moved to help. Someone called 911. A man yelled. The fire department's 20 minutes away, another voice replied. She'll be dead by then, said a woman in a red raincoat. Sophia didn't wait to hear more. She kicked off her broken sneakers and dove. The ocean hit her like a frozen fist. The salt burned her eyes. The current tried to drag her sideways against the rocks, but Sophia had learned to swim in the city pool before her mom died, before the foster homes, before everything went wrong. She kicked hard, fighting the waves, swimming toward the sinking car. The sedan was going down fast. Water poured through the cracked windshield. The engine compartment was already completely submerged. Sophia could see the woman inside, trapped by her seat belt, pounding weakly against the passenger window. The woman had long black hair and was wearing a white blouse that billowed around her in the rising water. Her mouth was pressed against the roof of the car, gasping for the last pocket of air. Sophia reached the vehicle just as it slipped another foot deeper. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked. She swam to the passenger window and pounded on the glass with her small fists. The woman's eyes met hers through the water-streaked window. They were dark brown, wide with terror, but also something else. Recognition. Sophia took the biggest breath of her life and dove under the car. The water was darker here, colder. Her lungs already burned. She felt along the bottom of the vehicle until she found a jagged piece of metal from the crash. A sharp fragment of the bumper that had torn loose when the car hit the rocks. She grabbed it and swam back to the passenger window. The woman was unconscious now. Her body floated limply in the water that had filled the car almost completely. Maybe 30 seconds of air left in the very top corner of the roof. Sophia raised the metal fragment and struck the window as hard as she could. Nothing. Again, a spiderweb of cracks appeared. Her chest felt like it was going to explode. Spots danced in front of her eyes. She needed air. She needed to surface, but if she did, the woman would die. Sophia hit the window a third time. The glass shattered inward. Water rushed into the car. But Sophia was already inside, fighting against the current, grabbing the woman around the waist. The seat belt was still fastened. Sophia's fingers fumbled with the metal buckle. It was stuck. Her vision started to fade. Her body screamed for oxygen. This was taking too long. They were both going to drown. Then the buckle clicked open. Sophia wrapped her thin arms around the unconscious woman and kicked toward the surface. But the woman was heavy, much heavier than Sophia expected, and they were deeper now. The car had continued sinking while Sophia worked to free her. 15 feet to the surface. Then 20. Sophia's legs cramped. Her arms felt like lead. The woman's dead weight dragged them both down. This was impossible. An 11-year-old girl couldn't save a grown woman from a sinking car. The physics didn't work. The strength wasn't there. But Sophia kept kicking anyway. Her head broke the surface just as her body gave out completely. She gasped, choked, went under again. The waves threw both of them against the rocks. Sophia's shoulders scraped against the barnacles, leaving a trail of blood in the water. Somehow, she found the strength to grab a piece of seaweed-covered stone. Then another. Hand over hand, she dragged herself and the woman toward the narrow strip of beach below the cliffs. People were shouting from above. Someone had climbed down and was running toward them through the surf, but Sophia barely heard any of it. She pulled the woman onto the wet sand and immediately started pushing on her chest the way she'd seen on television. Water poured from the woman's mouth. Her lips were blue. Her skin was cold as ice. "Come on," Sophia whispered, pressing harder. "Come on." Sophia tilted the woman's head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Then back to chest compressions. Breathe. Push. Breathe. Push. The woman's body jerked. She coughed violently, expelling more seawater. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're okay," Sophia said, her own voice hoarse from swallowing salt water. "You're going to be okay." The woman stared up at her with those dark brown eyes. She tried to speak, but could only whisper. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Sophia said, already looking around for her backpack. She needed to disappear before the police arrived, before the questions started, before they sent her back to another group home. But as she turned to leave, the woman's hand caught her wrist. "Wait," the woman said, stronger now. "Please, what's your name?" Sophia hesitated. She'd been using fake names for 3 days. Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, whatever seemed safe in the moment. But something in the woman's eyes made her tell the truth. "Sophia," she said quietly. "My name is Sophia." The woman smiled despite her chattering teeth. "I'm Lucia Benedetti, and you just saved my life." Sophia didn't know it yet, but that name would change everything because Lucia Benedetti wasn't just any woman. She was the beloved wife of Marco Benedetti, the head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. A man who would kill anyone who threatened his wife. A man who would do anything for someone who saved her. And right now, paramedics were loading Lucia into an ambulance while Sophia tried to slip away unnoticed into the crowd. But Marco Benedetti's men had already spotted her. They'd been watching from that black SUV since the moment she jumped into the water. The black SUV's engine hummed quietly as Sophia tried to disappear into the chaos. Paramedics shouted orders. Police cars arrived with flashing lights. News vans pulled up along the highway above, but the 3 men in expensive suits who stepped out of that SUV weren't watching the ambulance. They were watching her. Sophia grabbed her soggy backpack and started walking away from the beach, her bare feet slipping on the wet rocks. She kept her head down, trying to blend in with the crowd of onlookers. Just another curious kid who'd wandered down to see the accident. "Excuse me, little girl." The voice was deep, calm, and carried an accent that sounded like it came from old movies about New York. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She didn't turn around. She walked faster. "Hey kid, we just want to talk." Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Sophia broke into a run, scrambling up the rocky slope toward the highway. Her wet clothes weighed her down. Her muscles were exhausted from the rescue, but fear gave her speed. She made it halfway up the cliff before a gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Easy there, little hero. Nobody's going to hurt you." Sophia spun around, ready to bite, scratch, or kick if she had to. Instead, She found herself looking up at a man who seemed to take up half the sky. He was maybe 50 years old, with silver hair slicked back and kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating size. "My name's Angelo," he said, crouching down to her level. "Angelo Ricci. I work for Mrs. Benedetti's husband. The lady you just saved. She's my boss's wife." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard whispers about families like the Benedettis. The kind of people who made problems disappear, the kind who didn't forget debts, good or bad. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. Angelo smiled. It wasn't a scary smile. It was the kind her grandfather might have given her, if she'd ever had a grandfather. "Kid, you just jumped into the ocean during a storm to save a woman you'd never met. That's not nothing. That's everything." Behind Angelo, the other two men waited by their SUV. They looked like bodyguards from movies. Dark sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Hands folded in front of them, patient as statues. "What do you want?" Sophia asked. "Benedetti wants to meet you. To thank you properly." Sophia shook her head. "I can't. I have to go." "Where?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Where could an 11-year-old runaway go? What home was waiting for her? What family would welcome her back? Sophia's silence was answer enough. "Look," Angelo said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. "Benedetti asked me to give you this. For what you did today." Sophia stared at the envelope. It was stuffed with money. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to buy food for months. Maybe even enough for a bus ticket to somewhere far away where nobody knew her name. But taking money from these people felt dangerous, like stepping into quicksand. "I don't want it," she said. Angelo's eyebrows went up. "You don't want it. I just helped someone. That's what you're supposed to do." For a long moment, Angelo studied her face. Then he stood up and tucked the envelope back into his jacket. "You know what, kid? I think Mr. Benedetti is going to like you very much." Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Angelo was walking back toward the SUV. Over his shoulder, he called, "Marco Benedetti doesn't forget his debts, and right now, he owes you the biggest debt of his life." The three men climbed back into their vehicle and drove away, leaving Sophia standing alone on the rocky slope with questions spinning in her head. She didn't know that at that very moment, Marco Benedetti was pacing the waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital like a caged tiger. She didn't know that his wife had whispered Sophia's name to him through oxygen tubes and 4 lines. She didn't know that he'd already sent his best men to find out everything there was to know about the little girl who'd risked her life for Lucia. What Sophia did know was that she was cold, hungry, and more alone than ever. She climbed the rest of the way to the highway and started walking. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still covered the sky. Cars splashed through puddles as they passed, soaking her legs with dirty water. After an hour of walking, Sophia's strength gave out. She found a bus stop with a small covered bench and collapsed onto it, shivering. Her backpack was still damp. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She closed her eyes and tried to figure out her next move. Maybe she could hitch to the next town, find a truck driver who looked safe, or sneak onto a freight train like kids did in old movies. The sound of an approaching engine made her look up. Another black SUV was pulling into the bus stop, the same one from before. Sophia jumped to her feet, ready to run again. But this time, the passenger door opened and Lucia Benedetti stepped out. She looked different than she had on the beach. Her black hair was dry now, pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a long black coat over dark jeans and expensive-looking boots. But her face was still pale, and she moved carefully like someone who'd been through an ordeal. "Hello, Sophia," Lucia said softly. Sophia backed away until she hit the bus stop sign. "How did you find me?" "My husband's men are very good at finding people." Lucia took a step closer, but Sophia didn't come here to scare you. "I came to say thank you." "You already said thank you." "Not properly." Lucia reached into her purse and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I was about your age, and I've been waiting for the right person to pass it on to." Sophia stared at the box, but didn't take it. "I can't accept presents from strangers." Lucia smiled. "We're not strangers anymore. You saved my life. In my family, that makes us connected forever. Your family. The Benedetti family." Lucia's voice carried a weight that Sophia didn't fully understand. "We take care of people who take care of us. And you, brave little Sophia, took better care of me than anyone ever has." Sophia looked past Lucia to the SUV. Through the tinted windows, she could see the silhouettes of the men inside, waiting, watching, ready for whatever Lucia decided. I don't want to be part of any family, Sophia said. Families hurt you. They let you down. They send you away when you become inconvenient. Lucia's expression softened. Not this family. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. The places I've been. You're right. I don't know your story yet. Lucia held out the silver box again. But I know your heart. I know what you're made of, and that's enough. Sophia's hands shook as she reached for the gift. The box was heavier than it looked. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a necklace. A small golden pendant shaped like a lighthouse with a tiny diamond at the top. My grandmother told me that lighthouses guide ships safely to shore, Lucia said. Even in the worst storms, even when everything seems lost. She paused, watching Sophia's reaction. That's what you did for me today. Sophia touched the pendant with one finger. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever held. There's something else, Lucia said. My husband would like to meet you, to thank you properly. Will you come with me? Sophia looked up from the necklace. What if I say no? Then Angelo will drive you wherever you want to go. No questions asked. And if I say yes? Lucia smiled. Then you'll have the best meal of your life, a warm bed to sleep in, and a family that will never, ever let you down. Sophia clutched the lighthouse pendant in her small fist. For the first time in 3 days, she wasn't cold anymore. Sophia climbed into the SUV, clutching the lighthouse necklace like a lifeline. The leather seats were warm and soft, nothing like the hard plastic chairs in group homes, or the cold concrete she'd been sleeping on for days. Lucia sat beside her while Angelo drove through the city streets. They passed neighborhoods Sophia had never seen before, where the houses got bigger and the lawns got greener with every mile. Where are we going? Sophia asked quietly. Home, Lucia said simply. The Benedetti estate sat behind tall iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Sophia pressed her face to the window, staring at gardens that looked like something from fairy tales. Fountains, stone statues, trees older than anything she'd ever seen. The house itself was enormous. 3 stories of cream-colored stone with columns like a museum. Lights glowed warmly in dozens of windows. It was the kind of place Sophia had only seen in movies about rich people. This is where you live, she whispered. Lucia nodded. Marco and I don't have children of our own. It gets quiet sometimes. The SUV stopped in front of massive wooden doors. Angelo got out first, scanning the area like he expected trouble. Then he opened Lucia's door, then Sophia's. Welcome to the Benedetti family home, he said with a slight bow. Sophia stepped onto marble steps that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her bare feet looked tiny against the polished stone. Her torn jeans and faded t-shirt felt even more raggedy in this setting. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman in a black dress with gray hair pulled into a tight bun smiled at Lucia. Mrs. Benedetti, thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. I'm fine, Carmen, thanks to this brave young lady. Lucia placed her hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia, this is Carmen. She's been taking care of this house longer than I've been alive. Carmen's eyes widened as she looked down at Sophia. This is the child who saved you. This is her. Carmen knelt down to Sophia's level, her stern expression melting into something warm. Then you are a hero, little one. And heroes are always welcome in this house. They stepped into a foyer that made Sophia's jaw drop. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with angels and clouds. A curved staircase swept upward like something from a princess movie. Paintings in golden frames covered the walls. Mr. Benedetti is waiting in his study, Carmen said. But perhaps the young lady would like to freshen up first. Sophia looked down at herself. She was still damp from the ocean. Salt had dried in her hair. Her clothes smelled like seaweed and fear. That's a wonderful idea, Lucia said. Carmen, could you draw a bath and maybe find some clothes that might fit? Of course. Sophia found herself following Carmen up that incredible staircase, her hand trailing along a banister smooth as silk. They walked down a hallway lined with more paintings and photographs. Happy families, wedding pictures, moments of joy captured forever. Carmen opened a door to reveal the most beautiful bathroom Sophia had ever seen. The bathtub was the size of a small swimming pool, surrounded by white marble and gold fixtures. Fluffy towels hung from heated racks. Bottles of fancy soaps and shampoos lined glass shelves. Take as long as you need, Carmen said kindly. I'll find you something clean to wear. When Carmen left, Sophia stared at herself in the enormous mirror. She looked like a drowned rat. Her brown hair hung in tangles. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her lips were still slightly blue from the cold water. But around her neck, the lighthouse pendant caught the light and sparkled like a star. She filled the bathtub with water so hot it steamed. When she sank into it, every muscle in her body sighed with relief. The warmth soaked through her skin, chasing away the last of the ocean's chill. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real bath. The group homes had showers with lukewarm water and time limits. Before that, the foster families had made her feel like a burden for using too much hot water. She stayed in that tub until her fingers wrinkled, washing her hair 3 times with shampoo that smelled like flowers. When she finally got out, Carmen had left a pile of clothes on the counter. Soft jeans that fit perfectly, a sweater the color of cream that felt like wearing a cloud, new socks, even underwear that still had tags on it. Sophia stared at the clothes. They were nicer than anything she'd ever owned. How did you know my size? She called through the door. I raised 5 children. Carmen's voice came back. You learned to guess. When Sophia emerged from the bathroom, she found Carmen waiting with a hairbrush and a kind smile. Sit, Carmen said, gesturing to a chair by the window. Let me fix your hair. Sophia sat very still as Carmen gently worked the tangles from her hair. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such care. Her throat tightened with emotions she didn't want to name. There, Carmen said finally. Beautiful. Sophia looked in the mirror again. The transformation was incredible. She looked like a different person. Clean, cared for. Almost like she belonged in a place like this. Now, Carmen said, are you ready to meet Mr. Benedetti? Sophia's stomach fluttered with nerves. She'd heard stories about men like Marco Benedetti. Dangerous men who solved problems with violence. But he was Lucia's husband, and Lucia had been nothing but kind. I'm ready, Sophia said, though her voice shook slightly. They walked back downstairs and through corridors lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums. Carmen stopped in front of heavy wooden doors carved with intricate designs. She knocked softly. Come in, said a deep voice from inside. Carmen opened the doors and Sophia stepped into Marco Benedetti's private study. The room was all dark wood and leather, filled with books from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Behind a massive desk sat a man who seemed to fill the entire space with his presence. Marco Benedetti was not what Sophia had expected. He was tall and broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair and intelligent brown eyes. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. He looked more like a college professor than a crime boss. But there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a sense that he saw everything and forgot nothing. He stood when Sophia entered, which surprised her. Adults didn't usually stand for children. So, he said, his voice carrying that same New York accent as Angelo's. You're the little hero I've been hearing about. Sophia stayed close to the door, ready to run if she needed to. I'm not a hero. Marco smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less intimidating. I just helped someone. He walked around the desk, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. My wife tells me you dove into the ocean during a storm, that you broke a car window with your bare hands, that you dragged her to safety when she weighed twice what you do. He stopped a few feet away from Sophia. That sounds like hero work to me. Sophia looked at her feet. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Marco said quietly. They wouldn't have. 20 people stood on that cliff and watched. 20 people with phones who called for help but didn't help themselves. Only you jumped in that water. He gestured to a leather chair in front of his desk. Please sit. We have things to discuss. Sophia perched on the edge of the chair, still ready to bolt. Marco sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Tell me about yourself, Sophia. What's your story? Sophia's jaw tightened. Why does it matter? Because my wife is alive because of you. That makes you family. And family looks out for each other. I don't have a family. You do now. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia studied Marco's face, looking for lies or tricks. But his expression was serious, sincere. I don't understand, she said finally. Marco leaned back in his chair. In my world, there are rules, codes of honor that go back generations. One of the most important rules is this. You never forget a debt. And right now, I owe you a debt I can never repay. I don't want money, Sophia said quickly. I know. Lucia told me you refused the envelope. Marco's eyes crinkled with amusement. That tells me more about your character than anything else could. He stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a leather-bound photo album. He opened it and showed Sophia the first page. It was a wedding picture. Marco in a black tuxedo, looking young and nervous. Lucia in a white dress, radiant with joy. We've been married 23 years, Marco said softly. She's been the light of my life since the day we met. Without her, he trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia looked at the picture, then up at Marco. For the first time, she saw past the intimidating exterior to the man underneath. A man who loved his wife more than anything in the world. The doctor said she was underwater for 9 minutes, Marco continued. They said brain damage was almost certain after that long. But she's perfect, completely fine because you got to her in time. He closed the album and looked directly at Sophia. You gave me back the most important thing in my world. How do I repay that? Sophia shifted uncomfortably. You don't have to repay anything. Yes, I do. It's who I am. Marco returned to his chair. So I'm going to ask you again, and I want the truth this time. What's your story, Sophia? Where do you come from? Where are your parents? Sophia's hands clenched into fists in her lap. She'd been asked these questions 100 times by social workers, police officers, foster parents, but something about Marco's tone made her want to answer honestly. My mom died when I was 7, she said quietly. Cancer. I never knew my dad. After that, it was foster homes and group homes, and people who said they cared but didn't really. Marco's expression darkened. Someone hurt you. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. The last place was the worst. The man who ran it. Sophia swallowed hard. He had wandering hands, so I ran away 3 days ago. Marco's hands slowly curled into fists. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. What was this man's name? Sophia looked up, startled by the change in his tone. Marco's eyes had gone cold as winter. This was the dangerous man she'd heard about in whispers. I don't want to cause trouble, she said quickly. What was his name? Harrison. His name was Harrison. Marco nodded once, filing the information away. Sophia had the feeling that Harrison's life had just become very complicated. You said you've been on your own for 3 days, Marco said, his voice gentling again. Where have you been sleeping? What have you been eating? Sophia told him about the bus stations, the garbage cans, the cold nights under bridges. Marco listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. That ends now, he said finally. What do you mean? Marco stood and walked to the window that looked out over his estate's gardens. I mean, you're not going back to any group home. You're not sleeping in bus stations or eating from garbage cans. You're staying here. Sophia's heart jumped. I can't do that. I'm nobody. I don't belong in a place like this. Marco turned back to her. You saved my wife's life. That makes you somebody. And the Benedetti family takes care of each other. But what about the authorities? They'll be looking for me. Marco's smile was not entirely pleasant. Let me worry about the authorities. Sophia stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. A home, a family, safety. It seemed too good to be true. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Why, she whispered. Why would you do this for a stranger? Sophia looked into Marco Benedetti's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before in an adult. Complete sincerity. No hidden agenda. No lies waiting behind kind words. Because you're not a stranger, Marco said simply. Not anymore. You risked everything to save someone you'd never met. That tells me who you are inside, and that's the kind of person I want in my family. He walked back to his desk and picked up a framed photo. It showed him and Lucia at some kind of family gathering, surrounded by dozens of people laughing and embracing. This is what family looks like in my world, he said. Loyalty, protection, love that doesn't come with conditions. He set the photo down and looked at Sophia. I'm offering you something that can never be taken away. A place where you belong. People who will fight for you. A home. Sophia's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for years. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not worth saving? Marco knelt down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia. You dove into a freezing ocean to save a complete stranger. You stayed underwater for 9 minutes when your body was screaming for air. You performed CPR on someone twice your size until she breathed again. His voice grew fierce with conviction. You are worth everything. Sophia looked at this powerful man kneeling before her, offering her the one thing she'd given up hoping for. A real family, a real home, a chance to be more than just a survivor. She thought about the lighthouse pendant around her neck, about guiding ships safely to shore through the worst storms. Maybe it was time to let someone guide her home, too. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Marco Benedetti smiled and pulled the brave little girl who'd saved his wife into the first real hug she'd had in 4 years. And that's how a runaway child became the most protected person in the Benedetti crime family overnight. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes find the most unexpected homes. 3 months had passed since Sophia had become part of the Benedetti family, and she was still adjusting to the rhythm of her new life. Every morning, Carmen would wake her at 7 with a gentle knock on her bedroom door, followed by breakfast in the sunlit dining room, where Marco would already be reading his newspaper and drinking espresso. The routine felt surreal compared to the chaos of group homes where children fought over stale cereal and watery milk. Sophia's bedroom was larger than any place she'd ever lived. The walls were painted a soft lavender, chosen by Lucia specifically for her. A 4-poster bed dominated the center of the room, draped with silk curtains that made her feel like a princess from the fairy tales her mother used to read. Built-in bookshelves lined one wall, already filling with novels that Marco insisted she should read. Education is power, he told her repeatedly. Knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. Her days were structured but not rigid. Mornings were reserved for traditional schooling with a private tutor named Dr. Elizabeth Carver, a stern but kind woman who had been teaching the children of wealthy families for over 20 years. Sophia had missed so much school during her time in the system that catching up felt overwhelming, but Dr. Carver was patient, breaking complex concepts into manageable pieces. Sophia discovered she had a natural aptitude for mathematics and a deep love for literature that surprised everyone, including herself. Afternoons belonged to what Marco called life skills. Carmen taught her how to manage a household, not as a servant, but as someone who understood how things worked. She learned to cook traditional Italian dishes, to arrange flowers, to set a proper table for formal dinners. These weren't just domestic tasks, but pieces of a larger education about family, tradition, and the importance of creating a home rather than just living in a house. The lighthouse pendant never left her neck. It had become her talisman, a reminder of the moment her life changed forever. Sometimes she would catch Marco looking at it during dinner, and he would smile that warm smile that transformed his entire face. The pendant represented more than just a gift from Lucia. It symbolized her role in their family, the girl who had guided them safely through the storm. But Sophia was learning that being part of the Benedetti family meant more than just enjoying luxury and safety. There were responsibilities, expectations, and dangers that came with the name. She noticed how Angelo and the other men always positioned themselves strategically when they were in public. She saw how Marco's phone conversations sometimes made his jaw clench and his eyes turn cold. She understood, even at 11 years old, that their world operated by different rules than the one most people lived in. One evening in late autumn, Sophia was in the library working on her homework when she heard raised voices coming from Marco's study. The heavy wooden doors were closed, but sound carried through the old house in ways that surprised her. She recognized Marco's voice, tight with anger, and another voice she didn't know. A man speaking with an accent similar to Marco's, but rougher, more aggressive. You think you can just expand into our territory without consequences, Benedetti, the stranger's voice said. The Moretti family has been patient, but our patience has limits. Sophia's blood chilled at the name. She had heard whispers about the Morettis from Angelo and the other men. They were rivals, another crime family that had been feuding with the Benedettis for decades over territory, respect, and old grudges that no one could quite remember the origins of. Marco's response was measured but dangerous. Your family lost the right to complain about territory when you started dealing drugs to children, Salvatore. We've been more than patient with your incompetence. Now the stranger, Salvatore Moretti, she presumed, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Incompetence. That's rich coming from a man who's gone soft. Word on the street is you've adopted some little stray. Getting sentimental in your old age. Sophia's heart pounded as she realized they were talking about her. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more. That little stray, as you call her, has more honor than your entire family combined. Marco's voice had gone deadly quiet. And if you or anyone else so much as looks at her wrong, I will make sure your family name disappears from this city permanently. There was movement in the study, chairs scraping against the floor, footsteps pacing. You can't protect her forever, Benedetti. Girls like that, from the streets, they're damaged goods. Sooner or later, she'll disappoint you, run away, betray you. It's in their nature. The sound that came from Marco was something between a growl and a laugh. You clearly don't know anything about Sophia. She's stronger than any of your men, braver than anyone in your organization. She saved my wife's life when 20 adults stood by and did nothing. I know enough, Salvatore replied. I know where she came from, what kind of places she's been. We have people in the system, Benedetti. People who remember a little girl who caused nothing but trouble wherever she went. Foster families who couldn't wait to get rid of her. Group home administrators who said she was uncontrollable. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she listened to this stranger recite the failures and rejections of her past. All the families who had sent her back, all the adults who had given up on her, all the time she had been told she was too difficult, too damaged, too much trouble. Those people, Marco said with ice in his voice, were failures as human beings. Sophia survived things that would have broken grown men. She endured neglect and abuse and still maintained enough compassion to risk her life for a stranger. If they couldn't see her worth, that says everything about them and nothing about her. The meeting ended shortly after that, with threats barely concealed as polite warnings and promises to stay out of each other's business that everyone knew were lies. Sophia heard the study doors open and scrambled back to her homework, pretending to be absorbed in a mathematics problem when Angelo escorted Salvatore Moretti through the house. From her position in the library, Sophia caught a glimpse of the man who had spoken so cruelly about her. He was shorter than she had expected, with thinning hair and small dark eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the Benedetti home with obvious envy. When he looked in her direction, Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. This was a man who would hurt her if given the chance, not out of passion or anger, but simply because causing pain was something he enjoyed. After Salvatore left, Sophia tried to focus on her homework, but the words on the page blurred together. Everything he had said about her past was true. She had been sent back by multiple foster families. She had been labeled as difficult, troubled, a problem child. The group home administrators had written reports describing her as antisocial, distrustful, and prone to running away. All of those things were facts in her file, and apparently the Moretti family had access to those files. Carmen found her an hour later, still sitting at the library table with her mathematics book open, but tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Bambina," Carmen said softly, settling into the chair beside her. "What's troubling you?" Sophia looked up at this woman who had shown her nothing but kindness for 3 months. Carmen, who brushed her hair and taught her to cook and made sure she had everything she needed. Carmen, who had never once made her feel like a burden or an obligation. "I heard what that man said about me," Sophia whispered. "About my past. About how I'm damaged goods." Carmen's expression shifted from concern to fierce protectiveness. "You listened to Salvatore Moretti speak about you." Sophia nodded, fresh tears falling. "He said I would disappoint Mr. Benedetti, that I would run away or betray him, that it's in my nature because of where I came from." Carmen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Sophia spent her afternoons reading. When she turned back, her face was serious but kind. "Sophia, let me tell you something about nature. I have worked for the Benedetti family for 37 years. I have seen many people come and go from this house. Business associates, distant relatives, friends who turned into enemies. Do you know what I've learned in all that time?" Sophia shook her head. "Nature isn't about where you come from. It's about what you choose to do when faced with impossible situations. Your nature is what you showed on that beach when you dove into the ocean. Your nature is how you've conducted yourself in this house for 3 months, with grace and gratitude and kindness to everyone you meet." "But what if he's right?" Sophia said. "What if I am just a stray that Mr. Benedetti feels sorry for? What if I don't really belong here?" Carmen returned to her chair and took Sophia's hands in her own. "Child, do you know why Mr. Marco married Mrs. Lucia?" Sophia shook her head, confused by the change in topic, because she saw past the surface to the man he really was underneath. Mrs. Lucia was a school teacher when they met, from a simple family with no connections to this world. People said she didn't belong, that she was too soft, too innocent, too different. Carmen smiled at the memory. But Mr. Marco knew what the rest of us learned over time. Belonging isn't about where you start. It's about what you bring to the family and how the family changes because you're part of it. Mrs. Lucia brought light into this house. She brought kindness and culture and reminded Mr. Marco that there was beauty in the world worth protecting. And you, Sophia, you brought something even more precious. You brought hope. What do you mean? Sophia asked. You showed this family that honor still exists in the world, that someone can risk everything for a stranger without expecting anything in return. You reminded Mr. Marco why we protect this family and this community. You gave him back his faith in human goodness. Carmen squeezed her hands gently. Salvatore Moretti is a bitter man who destroys everything he touches. He wants you to doubt yourself because he knows that your strength threatens him. A girl who jumped into the ocean to save a life is not someone who runs away when things get difficult. That night at dinner, Sophia was quieter than usual, picking at her food while Marco and Lucia discussed plans for renovating one of the guest rooms. Finally, Marco set down his fork and looked at her directly. Sophia, you've barely said a word tonight. Is everything all right? Sophia hesitated, then decided that honesty was always better than silence in this house. I heard part of your meeting with Mr. Moretti today. I heard what he said about me. Marco's expression darkened, but his voice remained calm. What exactly did you hear? He said I was damaged goods, that I would disappoint you and run away because it's in my nature. He said people in the system told him I was trouble wherever I went. Marco was quiet for a long moment, and Sophia felt her heart sink. Maybe Salvatore was right. Maybe she didn't belong here after all. Then Marco spoke, and his voice carried a conviction that made Sophia look up in surprise. Salvatore Moretti is a man who measures worth by how much damage someone can cause and how much fear they can inspire. By his standards, I'm sure you seem worthless. You don't hurt people for pleasure. You don't take what doesn't belong to you. You don't solve problems with violence. By his definition, those are weaknesses. By mine, they're the qualities that make you invaluable to this family. Lucia reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. Sweetheart, do you know what Marco told me the night you agreed to stay with us? Sophia shook her head. He said that in all his years leading this family, he had never met anyone with as much natural courage as you possess. Not trained courage that comes from experience or desperation. Pure courage that comes from having a heart that can't ignore suffering, even when helping means putting yourself at risk. But what if I do disappoint you? Sophia asked. What if I make mistakes or cause problems? Or Marco interrupted her gently. Sophia, you're 11 years old. Of course you'll make mistakes. We all do. The question isn't whether you'll be perfect. The question is whether you'll face your mistakes honestly and learn from them. Based on everything I've seen from you so far, I have complete faith in your character. That weekend, Sophia experienced her first real test of belonging to the Benedetti family. They were attending the wedding of one of Marco's distant cousins, a lavish affair held at an expensive hotel downtown. Sophia wore a new dress that Lucia had chosen for her, deep blue silk that made her feel elegant and grown up. The lighthouse pendant gleamed against the dark fabric, catching the light as she moved. The reception was filled with people from their world, families who had known each other for generations, men and women who operated by the same codes and traditions that governed the Benedetti household. Sophia felt their eyes on her as Marco introduced her around the room. This is Sophia, he would say with obvious pride. She's my daughter now. Some people smiled warmly and welcomed her into their conversations. Others looked skeptical, whispering among themselves about the little stray that Marco had taken in. Sophia was getting punch at the refreshment table when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Two women, wives of associates she had been introduced to earlier, were talking in voices they clearly thought were too quiet for her to hear. I heard she's from some terrible background, one was saying. Street kid. Foster homes. Who knows what kind of damage that does to a child? The other woman nodded knowingly. Marco means well, but taking in strays never works out. They always revert to type eventually. Bad breeding shows through in the end. Sophia felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. She wanted to run from the reception, to hide in the bathroom until the evening was over. Instead, she found herself thinking about what Carmen had told her, about choosing how to respond when faced with difficult situations, about showing grace under pressure. She took a deep breath, turned around, and walked directly over to the two women. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I couldn't help but overhear you discussing my background. You're right that I came from foster care and group homes. You're also right that those experiences shaped me. They taught me to recognize kindness when it's offered and to value family when I find it. They also taught me to face problems directly rather than talking behind people's backs." The two women looked shocked, clearly not expecting to be confronted by an 11-year-old. Sophia continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Benedetti didn't take an astray. He gained a daughter who would do anything to protect this family. If you consider loyalty and courage to be signs of bad breeding, then I suppose we have very different definitions of character." With that, Sophia walked away, leaving the two women speechless at the refreshment table. She made it halfway across the reception hall before her composure cracked. Tears blurred her vision as she looked for somewhere to escape, anywhere she could be alone to process the hurt and anger churning in her chest. A gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her flight. She turned to find Angelo standing behind her, his expression proud and amused. "I saw what just happened," he said quietly. "You handled that like a true Benedetti." "Did I do the right thing?" Sophia asked, wiping her eyes. Angelo smiled. "Kid, you stood up for yourself and your family with more class than those two women have shown in their entire lives. Mr. Marco is going to be very proud when I tell him about this." "You don't have to tell him," Sophia said quickly. "I don't want to cause drama at his cousin's wedding." Angelo chuckled. "Sophia, standing up to bullies isn't causing drama. It's preventing bigger problems down the road. Trust me, word of what you just did is going to spread through this room faster than wildfire. By tomorrow, everyone in our world will know that Marco Benedetti's daughter can handle herself with dignity and strength." True to Angelo's prediction, the story of Sophia's encounter with the gossips spread quickly through their social circle. Over the following weeks, Sophia noticed a change in how she was treated at family gatherings and business dinners. People looked at her with new respect, recognizing that she wasn't just some charity case Marco had taken pity on. She was a young woman with backbone who could hold her own in their complex social dynamics. But the real test was yet to come. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sophia was walking home from the library where she had been researching a history project when she noticed she was being followed. The man was trying to be subtle, staying about a block behind her, but Sophia had learned during her time on the streets to pay attention to patterns and behaviors that seemed out of place. This man had been behind her for 4 blocks now, matching her pace, stopping when she stopped. Fear crept up her spine as she realized this might be connected to the Moretti family and their threats. Sophia had been taught emergency protocols by Angelo and the other security personnel. She was supposed to call for help immediately if she felt threatened. But something about the situation made her hesitate. The man following her didn't look dangerous. He was small and thin, probably not much older than a teenager. His clothes were dirty and worn. He looked more desperate than threatening. Sophia made a decision that would later be debated by every adult in her life. Instead of calling for backup, she ducked into a coffee shop and waited to see what the young man would do. Through the window, she watched him pace nervously on the sidewalk, clearly trying to work up the courage for something. After 10 minutes, he finally entered the coffee shop, ordered a small coffee with shaking hands, and sat at a table near the window. Sophia studied him more carefully now. He was probably 16 or 17, with the hollow look of someone who hadn't been eating regularly. His shoes had holes in them. His jacket was too thin for the approaching winter weather. Everything about him reminded Sophia of herself 6 months ago, desperate and alone, and trying to survive in a world that didn't seem to care whether kids like them lived or died. She made another decision that would surprise everyone who knew her. Sophia walked over to his table and sat down across from him. "Hi," she said calmly. "I'm Sophia. You've been following me for the past 20 minutes. Is there something you need?" The young man nearly choked on his coffee, clearly not expecting direct confrontation. He looked around the coffee shop frantically, as if planning escape routes. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold his cup. "Please don't call the cops," he said finally. "I wasn't going to hurt you or rob you or anything. He paused, looking down at his hands. I heard about you. About how you saved that lady and got adopted by that family. I thought maybe you might understand. Understand what? Sophia asked gently. The desperation in his voice reminded her so strongly of herself that her heart ached. I've been living on the streets for 8 months, he said quietly. Ever since I aged out of the system. I've been trying to find work, trying to get back on my feet, but nobody wants to hire someone with no address, no references, no family. Sophia felt a familiar twist in her stomach, the recognition of a story she knew too well. What's your name? She asked. David. David Chun. I heard that your family, the Benedettis, sometimes help people who need it. I thought if I could just talk to you, maybe you could put in a word for me. I'm not asking for charity. I just need a chance to prove myself. A job, maybe working in one of their businesses. Something legitimate where I can earn my way. Sophia studied David's face, seeing the pride and desperation warring in his expression. This was exactly the kind of person Salvatore Moretti would call worthless, damaged goods not worth saving. This was exactly the kind of person Marco had taught her to see as valuable, someone whose circumstances had tested their character rather than defined it. What skills do you have? She asked. David straightened slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. I'm good with cars. Learned to fix them when I was in foster care, had a placement with a family that owned a garage. I can do basic mechanical work, body work, detailing. I'm also good with numbers, bookkeeping stuff. Sophia made the biggest decision of her young life. She pulled out her phone and called Marco directly, something she had been told to do only in emergencies. When he answered, his voice was immediately concerned. Sophia, are you all right? I'm fine, she said, but I need to ask you something important. I'm at the coffee shop on 5th Street with a young man named David Chun. He's 18, aged out of the foster system, living on the streets. He has skills with cars and bookkeeping, and he's been following me because he heard our family sometimes helps people who need a chance. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sophia, you should have called Angelo for security if someone was following you. I know, and I'm sorry for not following protocol. But Marco, this boy reminds me of myself. He's not dangerous, he's desperate, and I think we should help him. Another pause, longer this time. Sophia could hear Marco thinking, weighing the risks of trusting her judgment against the potential consequences of bringing a stranger into their world. Finally, Marco spoke. Put him on the phone. Sophia handed her phone to David, whose eyes had grown wide as he realized who she was talking to. Hello, sir, David said nervously. Mr. Benedetti, I want you to know that I would never do anything to hurt your daughter or your family. I'm just looking for a legitimate opportunity to work and get back on my feet. Sophia could hear Marco's voice through the phone, calm and measuring. David listened intently, answering questions about his background, his skills, his goals. The conversation lasted nearly 10 minutes, with David becoming more confident as he spoke about his experience with cars and his hopes for the future. When the call ended, David handed the phone back to Sophia with shaking hands. He wants to meet with me tomorrow, David said in amazement. At one of his legitimate businesses, the auto repair shop on Harbor Street. He said if I passed the interview and background check, he might have work for me. Sophia smiled, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction. She had made the right choice. That's wonderful. Just remember, if he gives you this chance, don't take it lightly. Loyalty matters more than anything else to this family. David nodded earnestly. I won't let you down. Either of you. I swear on my life, if he gives me this opportunity, I'll prove that I'm worthy of it. As Sophia walked home, she felt different somehow. For the first time since joining the Benedetti family, she had acted not as someone being protected and cared for, but as someone with the power to protect and care for others. She had used her position and influence to help someone who needed it, just as Marco had used his to help her. When she arrived home, Marco was waiting for her in his study. Sophia knocked on the open door and entered, prepared for a lecture about security protocols and the dangers of talking to strangers. Instead, Marco gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she had first heard his offer to make her part of his family. Tell me about David Chun, Marco said without preamble. What made you decide to trust him? Sophia thought carefully before answering. He reminded me of myself, she said finally. Desperate, but not dangerous. Proud, but willing to ask for help. Someone who had been written off by the system, but still believed they could make something of themselves if given a chance. Marco nodded slowly. And what made you think I would want to help him? Because you helped me, Sophia replied. Because you've taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about recognizing worth in people that others have overlooked. Because you've shown me that real strength comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. Marco was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he smiled, that warm smile that transformed his entire expression. You handled yourself well today, Sophia. You saw someone in need. You assessed the situation carefully, and you took action to help while keeping yourself safe. Those are all qualities of good leadership. Leadership, Sophia repeated, surprised by the word. You're not just my daughter anymore, Sophia. You're growing into a young woman with influence and responsibility. Today you used that influence wisely. David Chin will start work at the auto shop next week. If he proves himself reliable and trustworthy, there will be opportunities for advancement. You gave him something more valuable than money. You gave him hope and a chance to rebuild his life. Over the following months, Sophia watched David transform from a desperate street kid into a confident young man with purpose and direction. He worked hard at the auto shop, arriving early and staying late, learning everything he could about the business. Within 6 weeks, he had been promoted to assistant manager. Within 3 months, Marco was trusting him with important jobs and significant responsibility. But more importantly for Sophia, helping David had awakened something in her that she hadn't known existed. A sense of purpose that went beyond her own safety and happiness. She began paying attention to other people who needed help, other kids aging out of the system, other families struggling with circumstances beyond their control. She started volunteering at a local community center, teaching younger children to read and helping with homework. Marco watched her development with obvious pride. Sophia was becoming the kind of person who used privilege responsibly, who understood that power meant obligation rather than just opportunity. She was growing into someone who would someday be worthy of inheriting the best aspects of the Benedetti legacy while leaving behind the darker elements that Marco himself was working to eliminate. The final test of Sophia's place in the family came on a cold December evening, almost exactly 1 year after she had pulled Lucia from that sinking car. Marco had been in meetings all day with other family heads, trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution to escalating tensions with the Morettis. Salvatore had been pushing boundaries, testing the Benedetti family's patience with increasingly aggressive moves into their territory. Sophia was in the library working on a college preparatory exam when she heard commotion in the main hallway. Raised voices, footsteps running, the sound of the front door slamming shut. She looked out the window and saw several of Marco's men gathered around their cars, talking urgently into their phones. Something was wrong. Carmen appeared in the library doorway, her face tight with worry. Sophia, I need you to come with me right now. We're going to the safe room until Mr. Marco returns. The safe room was something Sophia had been told about but never seen. A reinforced space in the basement where family members could wait safely if the house was ever threatened. Carmen led her downstairs and through a hidden door behind what looked like a wine rack. The room was larger than Sophia had expected, equipped with communications equipment, supplies, and comfortable furniture. Lucia was already there, trying to look calm but clearly frightened. What's happening? Sophia asked as Carmen locked the door behind them. Lucia took her hand and squeezed gently. The Morettis made a move against one of our businesses tonight. They hurt some of our people. Marco had to respond, but we don't know yet if they'll try to retaliate by coming here. Sophia felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach, but also something else. Anger. These people had welcomed her into their family, had given her everything she had never dared hope for. The idea of anyone threatening them made her feel protective in a way she had never experienced before. How long do we wait here? She asked. Until Angelo or one of the other men comes to tell us it's safe, Carmen replied. Could be an hour, could be all night. They waited in tense silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 minutes. Then Sophia heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps upstairs. Not the familiar heavy tread of Angelo or the other bodyguards, but lighter, stealthier footsteps moving through the house. Someone was inside who shouldn't be there. Lucia heard it too, her face going pale. Carmen was already reaching for the emergency phone to call for backup when Sophia made a decision that would define her relationship with the Benedetti family forever. She stood up and walked toward the safe room door. Sophia, no, Lucia whispered urgently. We stay here until help arrives. But Sophia was remembering something Marco had told her months ago. Family protects family. Sometimes that means following orders, and sometimes that means making hard choices to keep the people you love safe. She thought about the lighthouse pendant around her neck, about guiding others safely through storms. There's a back exit from this room that leads to the garage, Sophia said quietly. Carmen, you and Mrs. Lucia take that exit and drive to the backup location. I'll stay here and create a distraction if needed. Absolutely not, Lucia said firmly. Sophia, you're just a child. It's our job to protect you, not the other way around. Sophia looked at the two women who had become the closest thing to real family she had ever known. Maybe a year ago I was just a child, but I'm not anymore. I'm a Benedetti, and Benedettis don't abandon each other when there's danger. Before either woman could stop her, Sophia unlocked the safe room door and slipped out into the basement hallway. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure it could be heard throughout the house, but her hands were steady. She had learned from watching Marco and Angelo that confidence often mattered more than size or strength when facing a threat. She climbed the stairs slowly, listening carefully for sounds that would tell her where the intruders were and how many of them had entered the house. She could hear at least two voices coming from Marco's study, men speaking in low tones as they searched through his papers and files. Sophia crept closer, staying in the shadows of the hallway, trying to hear what they were saying. We need to find something we can use against him, one voice was saying. Financial records, business contracts, anything that proves illegal activity. Salvatore wants leverage, not just intimidation. The second voice was familiar, and Sophia's blood chilled as she recognized Salvatore Moretti himself. Forget the papers. Where's the girl? She's the real leverage. Benedetti cares more about that little stray than he does about his business empire. If we take her, he'll give us whatever we want. Sophia realized with crystal clarity that she had become the target, the weakness that Salvatore intended to exploit. Her presence in the Benedetti family, which had brought such joy and purpose to her life, was now endangering everyone she loved. She could retreat to the safe room, wait for rescue, and let others handle this threat. That would be the safe, reasonable choice. Instead, Sophia did something that would become legend in their world. She walked directly into Marco's study and faced the two men who had broken into her home. Good evening, Mr. Moretti, she said calmly, as if encountering intruders was a normal part of her daily routine. I believe you gentlemen are trespassing. Salvatore Moretti spun around, clearly not expecting to encounter the very person he had come to kidnap. His companion, a large man with crude tattoos covering his arms, immediately moved to block the study's exit. Salvatore's face broke into an unpleasant smile as he realized the situation had just become much easier than he had anticipated. Well, the little princess comes to us instead of making us search the whole house. Sophia forced herself to appear calm despite the terror racing through her veins. Mr. Benedetti will be home soon. If I were you, I'd leave now before you make this situation worse for yourselves. Salvatore laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Your precious Marco is dealing with the mess we made at his warehouse. He won't be home for hours. Plenty of time for us to have a nice long chat about your future. The large man stepped closer to Sophia, clearly intending to grab her, but she had learned more during her months with the Benedetti family than just academic subjects and social graces. Angelo had insisted she learn basic self-defense, not because he expected her to fight grown men, but because confidence in crisis situations often came from knowing you had options. Sophia waited until the man was within arm's reach, then moved with the speed and precision Angelo had drilled into her. She grabbed the heavy crystal paperweight from Marco's desk and brought it down hard on the man's instep, causing him to cry out in pain and stumble backward. In the same motion, she triggered the silent alarm that would immediately alert Angelo's team to trouble at the house. Now both men knew that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing, making them more dangerous but also more desperate. You little bitch, the injured man snarled, reaching for Sophia again. This time Salvatore stopped him with a sharp word. Don't touch her. She's no good to us damaged. He turned to Sophia with a calculating expression. You're smarter than I expected, I'll give you that. But you're still just a child playing in a grown-up world. Your loyalty to Marco is touching but misguided. He's using you, just like he uses everyone else. Sophia looked directly into Salvatore's eyes, seeing the cruelty and weakness that drove him to hurt others for his own advantage. You're wrong about Mr. Benedetti. And you're wrong about me. I'm not just some stray he picked up out of pity. I'm his daughter, and I'll protect this family with my life if necessary. That's what family means, though I don't expect someone like you to understand. Salvatore's expression darkened at the insult, but before he could respond, they all heard the sound of cars arriving outside. Angelo's team had received the alarm and was moving quickly to secure the house. The two intruders realized simultaneously that their situation had become untenable. The large man headed for the study window, clearly planning to escape through the gardens. Salvatore hesitated for a moment, looking at Sophia with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. This isn't over, little princess. Your family has made enemies tonight that won't forget or forgive. Sophia stood her ground as he moved toward the window. Tell whoever sends you that the Benedetti family doesn't negotiate with cowards who break into homes and threaten children. If you want to settle this like men, meet us in the open instead of skulking around in the dark. Within minutes, Angelo and his men had secured the house and confirmed that the intruders had fled. Sophia was sitting in Marco's chair behind his massive desk when they found her, still holding the crystal paperweight she had used as a weapon. Angelo took one look at the scene and shook his head in amazement. Kid, you never cease to surprise me. Most people would have hidden in the safe room until this was over. I couldn't let them threaten Mrs. Lucia and Carmen, Sophia said simply. And I couldn't let them think the Benedetti family was weak or afraid. Angelo smiled with obvious pride. Marco is going to have very strong feelings about what you did tonight. I just hope he's more proud than angry. When Marco finally returned home 2 hours later, he found Sophia in the kitchen with Carmen and Lucia, calmly eating a late dinner as if nothing unusual had happened. Angelo had already briefed him on the evening's events, but Marco needed to hear the story directly from Sophia herself. They sat in his study, in the same chairs where Sophia had first heard his offer to make her part of his family. The room still smelled faintly of the intruder's cologne, a reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Tell me what happened, Marco said without preamble. Sophia recounted the evening's events honestly, including her decision to leave the safe room against Lucia's direct orders and her choice to confront the intruders rather than wait for rescue. When she finished, Marco was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke, and his voice carried a complexity of emotions Sophia had never heard before. Sophia, what you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. You risked your life to protect your family, which shows the kind of character I hoped you possessed. You also disobeyed direct safety orders and put yourself in unnecessary danger, which could have resulted in tragedy for all of us. Sophia looked down at her hands, suddenly uncertain whether she had done the right thing. I'm sorry for disobeying orders, but I'm not sorry for protecting the people I love. Marco leaned forward, his expression intense. You protected them by risking yourself. That's exactly what family does for each other. But Sophia, you also proved something else tonight. You proved that you're not just my adopted daughter. You're a true member of this family, someone who will stand and fight when the people she loves are threatened. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Salvatore and his man had escaped. The Morettis made a serious mistake tonight. They thought they could use you against me, but they underestimated what you've become. They saw a vulnerable child they could exploit. Instead, they found a young woman with the courage to face down armed intruders in defense of her family. Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest, the satisfaction of knowing she had truly proven herself worthy of the Benedetti name. Tomorrow, Marco continued, word of what happened here tonight will spread through our world. Everyone will know that Marco Benedetti's daughter stood her ground against Salvatore Moretti himself. They'll know that the girl who once had nothing now has everything worth fighting for. And they'll know that this family stands together, no matter what threats we face. Sophia looked at the man who had given her everything she had never dared hope for. Thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance to prove myself. Marco turned back to her with that warm smile that had first convinced her to trust him. Sophia, you've been proving yourself worthy of this family since the day you jumped into that ocean. Tonight you just made it official. You're not my adopted daughter anymore. You're my heir, the person who will carry on the best of what the Benedetti name represents. Honor, loyalty, protection of those who need it most. As Sophia went to bed that night, she touched the lighthouse pendant at her throat and thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been a frightened runaway with no family, no future, no hope. Tonight, she was the protected and beloved daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city, someone who had proven herself worthy of inheriting a legacy built on strength and principle. She had found her home, her family, her purpose. Most importantly, she had found herself. The girl who had once guided a drowning woman to safety had learned to guide her entire family through the storms that threatened them. And tomorrow, as word of her courage spread through their world, everyone would know that Sophia Benedetti was no longer just a child who had been saved. She was a young woman who would spend her life saving others.